Today, you will hear a story about two men and their journey to become parents. But within that story, you will learn things about surrogacy, about donor conception, about disclosure, about so many things that will be very important to you on your path to parenthood. So, if any of these topics interest you, just get cozy on your couch, grab a cup of tea, and let's get started. From the Building Your Family community, this is the Building Your Family podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Schumann, author, researcher, and reproductive medicine therapist. As the leading destination for support and education for people using reproductive medicine to grow their families, we cut through the noise to provide you with research-based information, effective and actionable strategies, and the support you need to empower you to get into the driver's seat of your life and build the family of your dreams. We look forward to seeing you inside. Welcome to today's episode. We're glad you're here. I'm delighted today to introduce you to somebody that I've known for a long time. His name is Jeff Levin. He is a therapist. He is a wonderful human being, and he was previously the director of family services at the Gay and Lesbian Center, where I participated in both the expo and also ran my Tip Top workshop programs there. And if you're not familiar with my Tip Top workshop programs, please look at familybuilding.net. There's a lot of information about them. And they were workshops designed to help donor-conceived children understand developmental issues for themselves and understand their story and help their parents help them understand their story. And I was so happy to work with Jeff there. And now he is helping us at the Center for Family Building as a counselor, and he's a wonderful therapist, but he's also a dad of two boys, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his journey today. So welcome, Jeff. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to be back with you.
So, Jeff, could you start by introducing us to how you and your husband started to think about building your family and kind of take it from there? Take us along that road about the decision-making processes and how you started to think about we're going to start to build a family together.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So my husband's name is Andrew, and Andrew came to me one day and said, I'd like us to have a child. I'd like us to become parents. And I said, what are you, crazy? Is that in the cards for us? Where is this coming from? This is probably in 2006. He said this to me, maybe beginning of 2006. We had one set of friends who were parents at that time. They had adopted a child. But we had plenty of, I'll say, gay male friends. That was a lot of our community, and plenty of straight friends too. And none of our gay male friends were parents except for this one couple. But he must have been watching that one couple and thinking, oh, this might be for us. One of the interesting things about our family is that we had our kids through surrogacy, but Andrew himself is adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And one of his motivations for wanting to become a parent and wanting to do it through surrogacy was so that he might experience having a biological connection to someone, because he did not have that in his family growing up. He had two parents and he had a sister, but they were not connected biologically. He and his sister were both privately adopted separately.
Mm-hmm.
That was part of our journey. And so here we are in 2006. And we started to attend these programs at the LGBT Center after he pulled me along. It sort of grew on me, and I thought, oh, well, maybe I can do this. Maybe this would actually be a wonderful thing for both of us. It wasn't like he wore me down. I think it was more about after he planted the seed, I sort of got used to it. I did a little research myself. We had many conversations about it. And then once I started going to those meetings, I really began to see myself as a parent on this journey to becoming a parent. And those meetings helped a lot. They basically laid the groundwork for the paths to parenthood, what the different paths are: surrogacy, agency adoption, adoption through an attorney, and foster care adoption. And we chose surrogacy. And again, we didn't know anybody in our close friend group who had become parents through surrogacy, but Andrew knew of a couple, a friend of a friend, and we tapped into them and had a couple of conversations with them. We basically mirrored their path, interviewed the surrogacy agency that they had used, ultimately signed on with them in August of 2006.
Mm. Wow.
That was the beginning. So Andrew became really attached to the idea, and it took me a while to come around to it. And I promised him I would think about it. And of course, it's the greatest thing we've ever done together,
Mhm. Mhm.
having our two kids.
Mhm.
They are now 15 and 13 years old.
Wow.
I won't talk about being parents of a teenager yet. That's like a whole lot.
A whole nother ball game. But I guess I'm wondering, Jeff, so before you guys embarked on this, before he brought this subject up, it sounds like you never discussed it.
We had not discussed it in the beginning. We had already been together 3.5 years at that point. We had not discussed becoming parents. He had not brought it up. And I guess, you know what? For me, when I came out as a gay man, I probably just turned that off,
Mhm.
thinking, well, that's not in the cards for me. That's not gonna happen for me. And Andrew turned that faucet on again, little
Hmm.
by little. But
Interesting.
I think a lot of people turn that off.
Mhm.
I think more and more LGBTQ people are becoming parents
Yes.
today, certainly a lot more than there were 15 years ago when we started on this journey, 18 years ago, really. But I think plenty of people turn it off. They just
Yes.
think, all right, well, I've got to take care of myself in this world,
Mhm.
which can be hard at times. Certainly look at the current political
Yes.
climate that's
Yes.
going on around us, right? And it's
Yes.
hard for some of
No
us to take
question.
care of ourselves in the world.
But you're saying that you had it, there was an underground desire there anyway. So, but he didn't know that when you got married. He could have married somebody who was completely opposed to having children.
He didn't know that, and you know what? Neither one of us, because I think maybe his desire was turned off too at some
Mhm.
level. So neither one of us addressed it because neither one of us was really thinking of it as an option. And I
I
would
see.
encourage
Mhm.
couples getting together today, right? Since this is such a big topic in the LGBTQ community, this is definitely one of the things that we need to be talking about, certainly early on, not on the first date, but early on in the relationship. Because if one of
Mhm.
you wants to and one of you doesn't, and nobody is going to move, then there's going to be a conflict at some point.
Yes. Yes.
So it's definitely something, and in my work with couples, if they're coming in with this, it's certainly something that we talk about and we focus on so that we can get closer together on it one way or the other.
Mhm. Mhm. So, if let's say you get to that point and for the two of you, you finally got to that point like, okay, we're ready to go. How did you get started? You said you had some friends and you were able to pick an agency. How did you know that was the right agency? How did you know you were going to the right clinic? What were your thoughts at the time?
I think we were naive,
Mhm.
and one of the thoughts that we had was, well, if these guys did it and they have a beautiful child now,
Mhm.
let's just
Follow
follow
their path.
follow
Mhm.
their path, follow their lead. It worked for them.
Mhm.
I don't know that we knew about the things that would not be smooth,
Mhm.
which I don't know that it was the agencies doing. Not smooth things happen during this process,
Yes.
during this journey. They happen to lots of couples, and
Mhm.
I can share a few of the things
Yes.
that happened to us. So we just kind of took a leap of faith. I don't think there were nearly as many surrogacy agencies then as there are now.
That's for sure. Yes.
Right. So we picked a large one, a very established one located in Los Angeles. And I think they visit us here. We went out there and they seem to have it all together and they They explained every nook and cranny to us, and we just went with it. We said, well, this sounds good. I think now I would have a lot more questions to ask. Do
Mhm.
I want to work with a large agency? Do I want to work
Mhm.
with a smaller agency if I'm willing to do some of the work myself?
Mhm.
Are there other options out there? Are we hiring a separate legal team rather than using the ones that come with the agency in quotes?
Mhm.
Right? Because very often a surrogacy agency and a law firm are attached to each other, and they work hand in hand. I think there would be a lot of different questions, but we didn't know to ask them then.
Right. How would you know?
And the
Right.
groups that we attended at the LGBT Center, of which, I mean, I think when I say that we attended, I think we went twice, maybe three
Mhm.
times. I don't remember what I learned there, to be honest. I think it was you learn as you go. I don't think it has to be that way at this time because there's a lot more information out there. Technology has changed.
Yes.
I'll share one tidbit. At the time, we went to this agency and they had set us up with a doctor.
Mhm.
And I didn't know enough to say, well, do we choose this doctor? Should we look at other clinics?
Mhm.
And it seemed to me, it was just, and again, this was how naive I was. It seemed to me that they were in some way working together and this was the working relationship. And I'm just going to do what they suggest, which was to
Mhm.
go to this clinic. And I don't know that I would have had the tools to say, well, this clinic is going to be great or this clinic is not going to be for us. How would we have known?
Right.
I think one of the lessons here is that those groups being somewhat valuable, you need to find groups, you need to talk to friends, friends of friends, and people who are pursuing surrogacy or another path to parenthood. You need to exhaust yourselves and use every resource you have to make connections, to get information, get get referrals firsthand,
Mhm.
and put it together more piecemeal by yourself rather than trusting the people that you hire. Not because they're not trustworthy, but because this is the better way to do the job.
Yes, I'm with you on it's so interesting, and I'm not sure why, but I often find that this very same people who would, if they had heart surgery, probably look for a surgeon who's licensed, who has a good reputation. They'd look at their reviews. They'd look to make sure that he's involved in the medical associations, that he's published research, and that he's done lots and lots of surgeries of the type that they're looking for. And yet, when we go down this family building journey, we don't really think about it the same way. We're not looking for people with the same level of experience. If as you said, if somebody chose this agency and they're our friend, we say, okay, why not? But if it was a heart surgeon, we would say, let's make sure they've done 200, 2,000 cases, however many cases. Let's make sure they've been around for a while. Let's make sure that they're, well vetted. For some reason, we just don't do the same thing when it comes to our family building journey.
Yeah. So I'm sitting here, as you say that, I'm sitting here thinking about why is that? And I think
Hmm.
part of it is maybe some of us are deer in the headlights.
Hmm.
Maybe
Yes,
where
it's
this
anxiety.
prospect of becoming parents is so exciting and we can't wait, but also scary. And,
Hmm.
I'm definitely going to break this kid.
Hmm.
They're going to hand him to me
Hmm.
and I'm going to be,
Right.
so I just
What am
better
I going to
do
do
what
with them?
everybody tells me to do.
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a good observation. There is something different about it. But I do think there are more and more resources out there now than there
Yes.
ever have been before, including your new resource.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. The family building membership community. Everyone out there should check it out.
A lot of insight and a
Thank
lot of
you.
touch points and a lot of places to ask questions and get information.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Jeff. For everyone who doesn't know about it, please take a look on my website or in the show notes. It's called Building Your Family Community, and it's a treasure trove of resources and support. So, absolutely, that's a great place. And thank you for mentioning that. Imagine your beautiful future. You're snuggling with your child. You feel so connected to them. Your friends and family are so happy, and you have everything that you've ever wanted. I want this for you too, but I want more than that. I want you to feel secure knowing that you've made the best decisions, not just short term, but long term for your future family. Wherever you are on your journey, whether you're choosing a donor, choosing a clinic, learning how to talk to your donor conceived child about their origins, all of these decisions will have wider implications for your future. And I want you to have the right resources so you can feel empowered and confident at this very important time in your life. That's why I'm so excited to introduce you to Building Your Family. It's the only expert-guided platform designed for parents and parents-to-be using reproductive medicine. We provide unique strategies that you won't find anywhere else to make your path to parenthood smoother and more informed. And that's why our approach is about offering practical and actionable steps that you can use right now. Whether you're just starting out or already deep into your process, Building Your Family is here to guide you with expert advice, specialized education, stress reduction strategies, and a community to support you every step of the way. We can't wait to see you inside. Medical communities like the American Society for Reproductive Medicine that has a list of doctors under this, what they call the SART reports, Society for Assisted Reproductive Technologies, and we can look at your doctor's statistics now. There are all sorts of places to look. And so I agree with you. I think there's a lot of anxiety in making these choices.
I'm trying to remember the anxiety, but when you have a child, I'm sure you can relate to
It
this.
goes away.
Well, so much has happened. Now I'm
Right.
anxious about something else that's current,
So, right,
right?
exactly.
Who can remember what
Exactly.
happened in 2006? It's just
Yes, yes.
it's
It's hard to remember.
way too far back.
So do you remember how then, Jeff, you went to the next step, how you decided to choose? You had the agency, you had the clinic. Do you remember how you decided to choose your donor?
Yes. So we were looking at donor websites that were either supplied. There was a website that was affiliated with the surrogacy agency, and then there were other websites. And I think we went to other websites first. We came up with a donor, and at the same time, we were waiting to be matched with our gestational carrier. It took almost a year to be matched. The donor was then ready at about that time.
Mhm,
And I think, in terms of choosing the donor, we looked for someone who was educated,
mhm,
someone who looked not that different than us. And I remember being hyper focused on the family health history.
mhm,
We wanted to minimize, if a grandparent died of cancer, that was a consideration for us.
mhm.
Maybe we don't go with this donor if if there's cancer in the family. But of course, so many families have.
Everybody dies of something.
Right. We were really focused on the health profile, what she looked like, and her social profile. What did she do? How did she move through the world? If that
Mhm,
could be described in a couple of paragraphs. And most of these profiles had such descriptions. And we just went with our gut and chose someone. And then, some months later, all the parts seemed ready and we started IVF. There were some major bumps in the road for us.
mhm.
Some bumps were related to simply not getting pregnant from the
Transfer?
transfer. Yeah.
Mhm.
But other bumps were in preparation for the transfer date. So
Oh.
one time, the donor has to take shots and do a lot of prep for a bunch of weeks, getting her body
Mhm,
ready to put out a lot of eggs.
mhm.
And one of the donors we used, there were. I'll preface this by saying that we finally brought home our child from our second gestational carrier and our third egg donor.
Wow.
So the bumps in the road were also disqualifying. The donor made a mistake with what they were calling the trigger shot and
Wow.
did not produce any eggs on the big
Oh,
day.
no.
Right. And another time, the carrier made a mistake in her preparation on the day that we were hoping the transfer to take place. Her lining was not ready.
Mhm.
I think at that point, Because the donor was ready, we created the embryos. The sperm was there. We created the embryos, stored them. In those days, by the way, we used fresh embryos
Mhm.
whenever we could rather than frozen.
Mhm.
Things have changed a little bit.
Yes.
We had the embryos, and then we did the transfer a couple of months later. And because the surrogate was in California, we just couldn't go back and forth so much. It was kinda taxing. We would be out of work. The transfer took place with us not being present that time because of the errors that had happened before,
I see.
and it didn't work. At one point, we had what was called a chemical pregnancy.
Mhm.
There was the thought of a pregnancy, but not really. We tried again several months later, and there was a pregnancy, which went away after
It's so sad.
a few
Yeah.
weeks. So it became really hard at that point.
Yes.
It became really hard, and we had to ask ourselves the question, is this the right do we have the right combination here? We were already on our second donor at that point. Actually, then we had another transfer, which didn't produce anything. It just didn't work, with 2 very strong embryos, A-grade embryos. So we
Mm.
made a decision at that point to just change up all the parts, went back to the agency and said, "Look, we've tried this several times with this carrier. We need to move on." They prioritized us for rematching, which we were
It's
appreciative of.
great. Yeah.
And I want to say some 3 or 4 months later, we were rematched with an experienced gestational carrier. The first one was experienced as well. She had done this successfully before, but it just didn't work with us. So we were rematched and we chose another egg donor, our third egg donor. This time, everything took.
Mm.
This time, everything took.
Wow.
It took on our first try. Now, again, we started this, we signed a contract with that agency in August of 2006. We are now at November 2008.
Wow.
Because, right, there are gaps between these efforts. It takes so long, and we have to
Yes.
think about things and pay more
Yes.
money each time. There are hurdles to jump. It can't just be, "Okay, we're changing it up. Let's try again tomorrow."
Right. Right.
Here we were over 2 years later,
Wow.
finally with the successful combination of parts. And we put 2 embryos in, and we had decided that Andrew would go first if
Mhm.
possible, because he so badly wanted the connection. He was really feeling it.
Yes.
I was not adopted, and I didn't feel that
The
need.
same. Mhm.
And we had decided, okay, well, we're going to plan to have 2 children, so I'll go second. The doctor, however, the IVF specialist that was helping us, we changed clinics at that point too, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going back and
Wow.
forth here.
No, there's a lot of things
There's
going, a
a
lot
lot.
of moving parts.
I can't remember it all, but we changed
Mhm.
clinics at that point too. And we were very happy with the new doctor. And he said, "Look, you've got 2 great embryos here, one from each of you." And then there were other embryos as well. Actually, the rest of the other embryos were all Andrews. I did not produce great embryos. My sperm was not a great embryo producer. But he talked us out of having Andrew go first and said, "You've got 2 great embryos here. Let's put them both in and see what happens."
Mhm.
So we were pregnant and carried to term successfully. And it turned out that it was my embryo that took,
That made it.
that
Mhm.
made it. Yes.
Mhm.
So that's our
Wow.
15-year-old son. And we were thrilled. We were so happy to have him. And he was healthy and just, it was a real joy. We were at the birth
Nice.
and I remember it very well. I don't remember everything very well, but I remember
Mhm.
aspects of it very well.
That's wonderful. And so you had a close relationship with your surrogate?
Yes, and we still talk. There are texts and pictures exchanged. She lives in Minnesota. My kids were born at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota.
Wow.
That happened to be her hometown,
That's amazing.
and we had a great experience there. 2 times. We had a great experience there. Luckily, I mean, Minnesota is cold in the winter, but our
Yes.
kids were both warm weather babies, so one was born in
Lucky
August
you. Yes.
and the other was in May, so we never actually
Uh-huh.
had to go in the winter. We put 2 embryos in for that first pregnancy, and we put 2 in for the second time also. I know that most doctors, not all, but most or many, won't do that anymore
Right.
because it's really a high risk.
Yes.
And I'm with them on that. It
Mhm.
turns out that the surrogate that we used successfully had also done this for another family at a time when doctors were putting in multiple embryos and ended up getting pregnant for this other family with triplets
Wow.
and carried them all the way. And we're thinking, oh, I hope this doesn't happen to us.
Right.
Um, and I didn't want twins either, but I figured, oh, we'll deal with it if that was the outcome.
Mhm. Mhm.
So luckily, for our second pregnancy, for our second child and our second go with this, we put two more in. And strangely enough, we had one child born, that was the look we were going for. But at 10 weeks of pregnancy, she had to have a procedure done because the second embryo had gone ectopic.
Oh my gosh.
So she had to have surgery
Scary.
when my 13-year-old was in utero. And we were sure that everything was going to be okay. And it was,
That's tremendous.
but it was scary. So we were not without
Wow.
our pitfalls by any stretch.
Wow, that's amazing that they were able to do that.
Had they only put one embryo in, that probably would theoretically that would not have happened.
Mhm.
So I think it's a responsible move for doctors today to only put one embryo in. It's a risk to having multiples is a risk to the children. It's certainly a risk to the carrier. And there's statistics on this.
Yeah, and success rates are better now, so we don't have to worry about that as much about the success, whereas, success rates were not as good then, and so that was the idea. We put back more embryos, we have a better chance, but now we don't need to do that.
We have our family. We have two healthy kids. They are 20 months apart. And I guess I should talk about age a little bit. So when my older boy was born, I was 38 and Andrew was 41. So certainly not old in the scheme of parenting these days in New
Right.
York City,
Oh, that's for sure.
but not young
Mhm.
either. I didn't feel it then. I probably feel it now. We decided to have our second child fairly quickly
Mhm.
and try this because again, we don't know how long it's going to take.
Right.
So we didn't know how long it was going to take, and luckily, our transfer produced our second child, and they're 20 months apart. I know lots of parents probably would like to wait a little bit longer. And there are advantages to both, but given our ages, so when my 13-year-old was born, I was now 40 and Andrew was 43. I think a lot of people might have feelings about that. I wanna be a younger
Mhm.
parent. I don't wanna be having kids in my
Mhm.
40s, in my early 40s. Now again, in New York City, gosh, so many of our friends are our age. So many of the parents that I see at my kids' school are around our age, maybe older
Or older.
or older and certainly many younger. But it's something to consider if you're planning parenthood. How old are you? When do you want to be a parent? How do you want this to go? And of course, if there's two intended parents together, are you on the same page about this?
Yes, absolutely. And now, there's more and more research about the paternal age, whereas, we used to only worry about eggs getting old. Now we have to worry about sperm getting old, not to the same degree and not at the same age, but more and more men who are planning to have children later. We see all these people like Robert De Niro and all these people having kids when they're much older. And we know that there's so many more risks having children that much later. Certainly, you're going to be tired, but the sperm is not as good. And so some people are opting to freeze their sperm when they're younger, knowing that I might be going to graduate school or I might be taking on this new job and I can't have children for a while or what have you, because we have some benefit now that we know about to having younger sperm too.
Right. I agree with that. I don't think
Yeah.
there's any argument for that. I know women who are doing that with their eggs as well.
Yes.
They're not ready to be
Yes.
parents yet, or the stars aren't aligned. Let me just freeze these now.
Right. And it's no guarantee, but at least it gives you some potential for that happening.
I will say that even though, we're let's see, again, we signed that contract 18 years ago, And I just described to you a lot of pitfalls that we fell into. Even though technology has improved and, things go more smoothly, there are still pitfalls to go through today.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sometimes it just doesn't work. The parts, as I said before, the parts weren't coming together to produce what we wanted them to produce. So we do need to have a certain level of patience, a certain level of optimism, and a certain
Mhm.
level of, hey, it didn't work this time. We're staying with this. We're going to get back in there. We're going to just spend more time and, yes, probably spend more resources. And we're going to have a support system
Mhm.
and make
Mhm.
sure that our people know what's going on. I don't recommend telling everybody in your life about this because then it becomes hard to keep people abreast. If it's not going well for you, there are feelings
Yes.
that you're walking around with. Having to
Yes.
share those feelings with everybody becomes kind of exhausting. Sometimes you wish you didn't have to do it, but you do at the same time want to make sure that you have your couple of go-tos, your
Mhm.
cheerleading team, your people who are so excited for you. You want them on the sidelines kind of keeping up with you and being your support when you need it.
Yes. 100%. And as we move forward with that, and I think this is such a good point for everybody out there, we really need to appreciate that it might take more times at bat than you anticipate, but if you stick with it, there's a really good chance that it'll work out. And I know that's easier said than done, certainly, but certainly emotionally and financially for a lot of people. But it is certainly possible to achieve your dreams if you stick with it. I think this piece about the support, Jeff, is so important. And I'm wondering, as you and Andrew started to think about who you were going to talk to, who you're not going to talk to, how you were going to kind of manage that disclosure, were you also thinking about telling people about the details of, who the donor is, who your surrogate is, and also who's genetically connected to the baby?
I think at first, when our kids were born, I didn't want to talk about the genetic connection
Hmm.
because I didn't want the people in our social circle to say something out loud that might make one of them think that they don't belong to one of us.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
that for a small child, that can be easily misunderstood and
Yes.
confusing. And this was not a language, right?
Hmm.
This was not a language that people spoke. And, if you're pursuing parenthood, it's likely that many of the people in your circle, if you're a gay couple or if you're trans or whoever you are, it's likely to be misunderstood or misstated by some of the people
Hmm.
in your circle. Not everybody is fully educated in every area of our lives.
Right.
We made sure that our kids knew after a certain point. And there's a very, when they were young, 2 daddies can't have children on their own.
Hmm.
So a nice lady helped us by
Hmm.
carrying you in her tummy, both of you. And her name is
Hmm.
Jenny, and you met her once or twice, and that's what completed our family. That's what brought you to us. Later on came more of the explanation of who is biologically connected to who,
Hmm.
but only a little bit later on, at a time when we thought that they could understand it, but not feel othered by it or not feel out of place by it. And that has worked. I don't know what the future holds. I'm sure there's some curiosities as to who the egg donor was, that
Hmm.
biological link for them, but it hasn't been much of a problem for us
Hmm.
as our kids have grown up into teenage years.
And are they asking about their donor?
My older boy is curious a little bit. He wants to see a picture of her, which I have to dig out of the rubble,
Mhm,
right? I know we have some, but I we looked and looked and
mhm,
we couldn't find it, and I'm sure we could call the agency and get something sent to us. He's curious, but it's not on his mind every day. It's a curiosity. It's not a big need at this point.
so he's more curious than his brother.
Yes. His brother, if you're not a basketball, then his brother is not interested. All about basketball. Uh,
Uh-huh,
so, yeah,
right.
He's far less curious. I do think they feel attached to us. They feel
You're
connected.
the parents.
Yeah, we're their parents, and they don't
Right.
really question it.
Well, I think that that's a really good point, Jeff. And as a therapist, also, I think you'll appreciate it. And I hope everyone out there thinks about this who's pursuing donor conception. That children are humans also, right? We all have different personalities. And so just because you read somewhere that this child felt this way about their donor, it doesn't mean all children will feel that way, right? You really need to investigate and be curious about who your child is. And I think many parents see from a very young age the differences in temperament of their children, right?
Yes, yes, and we have seen that too. One kid is patient and has a lot of could sit and do a jigsaw puzzle for hours, and the other one screams and yells when things aren't aligned for him. So, right? And
Hmm.
that's parenthood, and you get to know your kids and you love them for, their perfections and their imperfections.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And their personalities are also going to inform how they, at different stages, will feel potentially about their donor, about their genetics, about any of it, about their story. And so I think it's so great that you're able to just listen to your kids and follow their lead here.
Yeah, I think so. And I do want to find the photo, and I do want to have more conversations about it with them. Sometimes it's hard for me too. Sometimes I don't know, is this the right time?
Hmm.
They're not asking, maybe I should hang back. Maybe we should hang back, or maybe there is no right time and you just kind of go in with it and say, so how are you feeling about your
Hmm.
identity
Hmm.
and your family? What do does anybody ever ask you questions about it? And I think in younger years, some kids asked. I remember dropping off my older boy in his third grade classroom, and another boy said to him, not in a very articulate way, "Where's your mom? How come it's always your dad that drops you off? Why doesn't your mom drop you off?" And then some other kid yells out, "He doesn't have a mom. He has two dads," which I appreciated very much in the moment.
Yes, yes.
So these are conversations that kids have.
Hmm.
This brings up for me also the idea that we've been lucky in that school, and I guess some of the other places that we've entered, but in particular school, we've never felt like the only. We were not the only gay dads on the grade. There were other parents who were identified LGBTQ. Not a lot, but a sprinkle. And
Hmm.
I always felt lucky for that,
Yes.
um, because I don't want my kids to feel like they're the other. And I think we're out of the zone at this point. I think that's a feeling that a kid has during younger years. It could happen in teenage years, but certainly during younger years. If you've made it to teenage years without them feeling othered, I don't see that happening anymore for my boys.
And I think, it's a testament to also what you're saying and sharing with your kids and telling them and being open with them from the start. Lauren, our therapist on our team as well, was on this podcast talking. And for those of you who haven't seen it, you should really see it. She talks about how her kids told her, we're talking about their donor. And she said, "Do you understand that you have a donor?" And they said, "Well, we have a mom, a mommy, and a donut." And she said, "A donut?" And they said, "Yeah, you had a donut. You had to have a donut." And they said, "No, you don't. You didn't. You weren't born with a donut." But she said because she has such a thick Brooklyn accent, she feels like that's how her children heard it.
Oh.
So they grew up thinking that they had two moms and a donut. So
That's a good story.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And, even with that, that was just something they kind of took in stride, right? You tell your children, they start to get a sense of, what the story is and they accept it and they evolve over time. So I
Yes.
think that's really nice.
Yes. But it also brings up, what environments are you taking your kids into, right?
Hmm.
So, I mean, to go back to the very beginning of our discussion here, it's not only do we want to be parents and do we want to be parents together, assuming there are two. It's, well, where do we envision living if we become parents?
Yes, I get that a lot.
Which one of us is going to be more available to go on the pediatrician runs and get the call from school that
Yes.
your kid needs to come home. He's running a fever. And, the 20 other things that I can't think of right now, but that we live every day as parents. So these discussions, and this is what I focus on in my practice too. It's basically which area of life are we aligned in, and which areas do we need to do some work in. And it could be financial, it could be family concerns. Are we close to family? Are we not close to family, both emotionally and geographically? So these all have to go into those early talks that you brought up
Yes.
in order for them to be fully effective.
Right. And also, as we discussed earlier, how open do you want to be? Are you someone who wants to share everything on Facebook and tell every single person? Or is your personality more private? And do you want to just share with your close friends so that you don't have to keep going back to them time and time again if a treatment didn't work and have to give them all those details? Do you want to share with your kids who's genetically connected and let them share when they're ready? All those decisions really are important for the couple to have, right? Because we can't really do that alone.
Yes, I agree with all that. I think that there are a lot more open donor relationships now than there were
Yes.
15 years ago.
Yes.
So, as I mentioned, my kids do not know their egg donor. It was an anonymous arrangement. They know the carrier, but not the egg donor. We did make a contact through our agency just to check in with that donor to say something like, our boys are growing up, and if they were open to meeting you some years down the road, are you open to that? And the response came back, yes. And
That's great.
it's a choice that they can make, and hopefully, I would be either along for the ride with them, or if they want me and Andrew out, then we'll be waiting,
Mhm.
maybe nervously. I don't know,
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
but that's something that I would want for them if they want it.
That's nice. That's beautiful, Jeff. That's great.
Thank you.
So as we wind down, is there anything else you think that we haven't covered that you feel like our audience should know?
Well, where are the resources in
Mhm.
addition to your offering, Lisa? What are the other resources for intended parents in the LGBTQ community? I know the LGBT Center where I worked for a bunch of years isn't offering those programs right now. Not because
Mhm.
they weren't needed or successful, budget changes, directive changes, so they closed that down. Where else can people go besides the people that they know? I'm sure there's plenty of online resources,
Yes.
but they're
Yes.
so anonymous and you don't really know what you're getting. But I'm not sure. If it's not a community, I was referring
Mhm.
to like online chats or connecting with people that you actually don't know, not including a professional.
Well, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine does have a lot of resources, and there is an LGBTQ special interest group there now, which is wonderful. We have Men Having Babies is a group that regularly has conferences you can go to. And also, I think it's important to remember that as much as you like your agency and your clinic, you can look up the statistics for a clinic. You can't look up the statistics for an agency. It doesn't exist. And so it's really important to make sure that that agency is well vetted and has been around for a long time. And particularly now in our political climate, that they have seen things that have been difficult and they've been able to deal with them. And that typically just happens over time. If you're surrogate is in a red state, then there are going to be more problems potentially dealing with issues around termination and medical testing than you would in a blue state, let's say. There are a lot of things that you want to make sure your agency can handle that maybe not every agency can handle. So again, time at bat is important to be able to have experience just like you would for your heart surgeon and to make sure that your fertility clinic has good statistics and of course is queer friendly. That would be my recommendation.
That answers it.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. How could people reach out to you if they have questions?
My website is jefflevinlcsw.com. They can certainly reach me through you if they all know where you are,
The Center for Family Building? Yes.
because we're connected. That's what I would recommend, to to send me a note through that website.
Well, thank you so much for coming, Jeff. I really appreciate it. And everybody out there, thank you so much for joining us. Please press subscribe because that's how we keep going. It's really important for us. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation. It was really great, I think. And I think that we've delivered a lot of information. So make sure you come back next week. Hi, it's Lisa Schumann. I hope that you enjoyed that video and I hope it helped you. And if it did, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe because that's how we keep going. It's really important to us. And if you liked it, you might like this one.